Hello everyone. This is my second attempt at trying to record this video because I am incensed and I am struggling to regulate my tone. I personally want to approach this video with linguistic specificity. I want to ask the tarot community, quote-unquote community, some questions. What do we value? And why do we use the word community? I have been told anecdotally that I express myself well on this platform, that my words are meticulous, that they are nuanced, and that they are many. That comes from a place of intense education and very immersive and mandatory public speaking training. It also comes at a cost. It's incredibly difficult for me to speak, especially on emotional topics, or topics that I feel are important. The more important a topic feels when it comes to human relations and interpersonal dynamics, the less I am able to speak on the issue. But I'm told that this channel has some value in that regard, and whether or not you, viewer, agree with that or not, I think that there is a double standard in the tarot community. We use the word community and we talk about being supportive of each other. We talk about making friends and finding connection. And no doubt those things are occurring. But I think we're a tarot community at large until someone errs a little bit in their language while trying to overcome their sense of personal frustration and anger to convey a message of some kind. So while I'm not claiming that the audience of my channel, for example, is the same as the group of individuals who have responded to Mixtress Ray's video with aggression are the same people per se, I want to highlight that if we talk about community, community also involves employing different types of different levels of nuance in our skills of listening. And listening does not necessitate agreement. Listening simply means that before we respond, we consider. My personal bias in this scenario is that I care very deeply about the specificity of how I deliver messages, and I strive not to show my emotion. Because if I don't prioritize those things, I sound ridiculous all the time. But this level of specificity comes at a cost. I am an autistic individual, so it is intensely exhausting to be able to figure out how to talk about things I care about or that affect me without stumbling onto something that may anger others. But if I were to use an unfortunate word in the delivery of something I care very much about, in the delivery of a message that I think needs to be heard, would I warrant attack? Would the message immediately be null and void? Would the value of this platform, my space that I'm creating on YouTube, immediately plummet? I think it would. The topic of Mixtress Ray's video had to do with the various types of effects of income equality, both on her as a limited individual with her own biases, as she mentioned, but also on the deck industry. I do not necessarily think the same as Mistress Ray on every point mentioned within the video. There are some points where I pretty strongly differ. But I do feel that the tarot community has an issue with double standards. If someone is very good at curating what videos they watch, or budgeting for their decks, these are both things that I spend a lot of my time making sure I do. For example, I value those skills very highly. That does not mean that the rest of tarottube isn't at times what I would call a toxic place. Perhaps it's better for me to say a very capitalist place. In my experience, trying to sort through the algorithm to find channels that are the sorts of channels I would like to watch, unless I'm relying on word of mouth alone, I end up having to filter through a lot of review material and walkthroughs. That is not to say that reviews and walkthroughs don't have their value, but reviews especially have value because they are subjective, because they are meant to provide additional context on a product to the viewer. If the product in question is a tarot deck, we have online shop listings, yes, where we can then go look at the price. But it's the video that in many cases alerts us to the existence of such a deck. And the goal is to ensure that we are already on the website listing before we see its price. If a reviewer receives a copy of a deck for free, with the understanding that they do a review of it, I don't see a problem in thinking more inclusively by saying, I received this for free, it cost this much to purchase. If the person purchased it, I don't see a problem with being more inclusive in saying, I purchased this, it cost this much to purchase. I personally would also love to hear, and sometimes this is mentioned and many times it is not, when the deck was acquired and how long the person spent using it before the review has been offered. When people offer that information, it's very helpful. I don't think that's invasive. Someone else may disagree with me. But again, that's contextual information that then helps me decide who and what I'm going to try to view and watch. I think the argument of if you don't like such and such type channel, then just don't watch them is a false argument in certain ways. Obviously that's, as I said, a very valuable skill. It's certainly a good skill for managing mental health. It is part of the responsibility that we as individuals have as we navigate YouTube ourselves. However, if we have more and more and more voices within the quote-unquote community clamoring that this is very difficult for them to manage, that wading through the stuff that damages them is increasingly taxing on their mental energy or their ability to focus or whatever it happens to be, their ability to mind their wallet, then I think what we have is a larger issue at hand. Presumably all of these people are aware that they can click away from a video. So if we have larger numbers of people who are struggling to click away from certain videos, that's information that matters. A person's subjective experience is not automatically invalid. Objectivity, if it exists, I don't think it does, but if it exists, objectivity is not the only form of value to be had. I would argue that its value is very limited. Context, as we ought to know, I would think, with things like tarot readings, is important. So context matters in other spheres of life too. Another way in which I think there is a double standard in the community If we take issue or offense, or if our feelings have been hurt by the language that someone has used in their video, in the same way that if we were confronted with someone in person, it is useful to ask, is this person upset about something? Perhaps their anger is coming from a valid place, or their frustration is coming from a valid place. Are they insulting me if I feel that insulting language is being used? In the case of Mixed Rays video, the topic at hand was larger channels that dominate the algorithm, that offer review, 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 walkthrough, 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 walkthrough. To which I would add they do so in, usually for decks that are quite culturally misappropriative as well. That's my opinion though. That was not mentioned in the video. Channels that engage qualitatively with their personal experience of tarot cards, offering all sorts of different creative ideas, personal projects, methods of exploration, and so on, were not the topic at hand. But those are some of the channels that have responded with incredible aggression. To me, from my perspective, that is telling. I think that's very telling. I did not have no personal feelings of defensiveness when I watched Mixed Rays video. Language does have an effect on people, and that's valid. But I think there's a double standard in insisting that before someone is allowed to make an attempt to offer some thoughts on grievances and frustration that they are experiencing on an everyday level in their life, they must somehow master perfect language first. That is a technique that in other areas of the world is used by oppressors. The capitalist system, in my opinion, is one of those oppressors. To be able to speak perfectly requires, in some cases, a very neurotypical mind. To be able to speak perfectly and deliver everything with utmost smoothness and no potentially upsetting language requires a very high level and a very intense level of education, which ties into personal economic prosperity, privilege, at least in our family of origin or something along those lines. It ties into geographical region and opportunity. I think that to acknowledge privilege in our videos, including when it comes to method of acquisition for tarot decks and discussing whether or not we feel that the tarot deck sales industry is getting out of hand and the negative impact that has on many people within the community, I think those are all ways in which we can be more inclusive and acknowledge some of these biases that we all have. Because we're human beings who come from places and certain experiences. To insist that someone express something perfectly before you're going to be able to take on board their message is, I think, a false argument. If the aim is that before you're going to ingest and chew over something someone says, if the aim is that before you do that, the message has to be delivered in such a way that it doesn't feel difficult and sticky, then you're never going to listen to a perspective you don't already have. You're never going to be able to take on board new information. Because that's what that tactic is. It's a barrier to communication. I don't have to listen to you until you can word it in such a way that it makes it very, very easy for me to digest. Well, therefore, if anything ever challenges you, then you can claim that someone didn't express it perfectly. A perfect explanation does not exist for anything, because it turns out we're all different subjective human beings. We hear language differently, we process information differently, we process information at different speeds. That's important. Our differences and our subjectivity and our ability to connect with one another in all of the ways is important. So while that includes when we say something rash in anger, I think to attack someone for what we see as the rashness and the hurt contained in their words with rash and hurtful words is a double standard. People in comment sections don't face the same consequences that they face if they are the one uploading the video. People in comment sections may perceive that they're talking mainly to one person with whom they are taking issue, but that person is dealing with all of the people in the comment sections over and over and over again. And in the case of Mistress Ray's video, I think she very much represents an experience that many people are having with the tarot deck industry, and also from different economic backgrounds, from different personal backgrounds. Certainly in different countries, the tarot deck industry is incredibly American and also to some extent UK centric. Most of the rest of the world seems to be struggling to keep up. To some degree or other. So to some of the incredibly demeaning language that has shown up in that comment section, where's your accountability? Where were your tarot cards to help you slow down before you spoke to someone like that? If you have issue with how the original message in the video was delivered, where's the issue with the way you deliver your message? Listening does not require that you agree. Listening to someone does not compromise your agency. And, as has been mentioned in the comments, if there are people out there who, because of Mistress Ray's video from 2 days ago, if there are people out there who are now afraid to upload their experiences with a deck they're really excited about, in my opinion, they should be afraid to do so, because the second they say something slightly unfortunate, the entire tarot community is going to come for them. Or not the entire community. There were people who had lots of qualitative questions to ask, who went, wow, not sure I agree. Oh, no, I'm really not sure about that, but have you considered this? I would encourage this, but also, actually, you have a valid point about this, but I would just tweak it. Like, that is discourse. That is discussion. That is people saying, I don't agree with a damn thing, but kudos for speaking out. I think that the way in which we talk about tarot being a spiritual tool, first of all, ignores those who use tarot not as a spiritual tool. But second of all, ignores the fact that until the deck is in your hands, it is not a spiritual tool. It's a product sitting in a warehouse produced by a company. And if it's produced by an indie creator who has worked for years on the art, then that person is absolutely entitled to price the deck accordingly. But I don't think that asking for transparency about that, and from the entirety of the deck industry, not just indie creators, I don't think that asking for transparency compromises an artist's integrity or the value of their work. If we insist that it does, then we are furthering a much more capitalist understanding of what a product is and what art is. Artists should not have to wildly overprice their decks in order to make a living. But it is, among other things, the mass market industry that is pushing that. It is the rising cost of living that's pushing that. It is the rising cost of commissioning deck printings that's pushing that. It's like giving a transparent breakdown of where the money needs to go in order to make this viable financially for an artist actually validates the struggle of artists, shows you culturally how very hard it is to get industries to acknowledge the value of art. We need to hold the industry accountable. And part of how we do that is acknowledging that many lower income people, among others, are struggling and hurting and feeling excluded. They're not able to keep up with tarot tags. They can't partake in the community. They're being algorithmically ignored. So that our exposure to what tarot is, or what tarottube is, keeps inching further and further and further and further in this direction of let's just show lots of decks all the time with impunity. And if that's something you want to do, especially those channels that do it in a conscientious, qualitative way, acknowledging their privilege, discussing how and why they really love this collection of decks. If it is only 10 indie decks, that's absolutely wonderful, because there are people who are doing that in a qualitative, measured fashion. No one's making you not do that. People are just asking you to consider how we approach these things, how you approach these things, how you would like to see other people approach these things. You have a voice in this community. If someone else has a voice that you disagree with, that does not mean your voice is gone. Chances are your voice is just exactly where it was before, especially, you know, since it's hardly one of the biggest channels ever that's currently causing this hullabaloo. So where's our temperance? Where's our lover's card? I was having a discussion the other day with someone who was pointing out, independently of this exact topic, the progression in older deck systems of the Lovers, the Chariot, Justice, Hermit. And I couldn't help but think about this whole scenario. That sense of integration and incorporating our personal shadows of self-love, but also the love of others, intermingling with another person. The Lover's card, especially in its more healthy aspects, is about that kind of give and take. It's not about cutting things off. If it's about marriage exchanges, if it's about relationship readings, like, we don't talk about these things only in terms of if you, then not me. And from that amalgamation, we get the motion of the Chariot. And from that incredible motion and outward expression of the Chariot, we get justice. This overarching, wonderful concept, the balancing of those scales, the give and take. And from that outward reaching, all-encompassing idea of justice, we get this inward Hermit, that inner glow, knowing who we are too. There's this constant scissor effect between the two. And then we have the Wheel, because we do it all over again. And that's part of that healthy cycle. Okay. I sincerely hope that I have expressed this in my usual cool and calm way, because I know that if I have not, people will come for me. So, as I always say, I hope everyone is doing well, taking care of themselves to the best of their ability, and being kind. And I'll see you all next time.